So it's pretty well known by now just how successful the Netflix series Squid Game is. It was successful worldwide and it generated almost $1 billion on just a $20 million budget. It's pretty impressive. And I really did enjoy the show. Squid Game is an extremely exciting show and it's just presented very well. It's pretty amazing just how small the budget was, because when you watch it, you really feel like you're watching something special. What I enjoyed most about the show was just how unpredictable it was. While watching it, you feel like any character could die at any moment, and that kinda happens. It even had a few really good twists that I didn't see coming. I heard some people complain that it was too brutal, but when you think about it, it's more so brutal in concept rather than visually. And that's the genius of it. But while watching it, I really couldn't help but find similarities to other anime, and specifically Kaiji Ultimate Survivor. And I think it's really unfair just how Squid Game can be this giant success, but Kaiji not so much.
およそ半数はこの釜の底から引き上げられる。お前らが今なすべきことは勝つこと。勝ってここから抜け出ること。心に刻め。勝つこと。勝つことだけが全てだと。勝たなければゴミ。勝たなければ。勝たなければ。勝たなければ。
You could argue that every story has already been told, and now all we get are retellings. You hear people criticize stories all the time, saying how one was taken from an older story, but what was that taken from, and what about before that? What really ends up mattering is just how well the story is being presented. If the story was originally presented poorly and now the same story is being told better, then the retelling is better. But that isn't exactly the case with Squid Game and Kaiji. There's been other anime that depict gambling, but never quite to the level of Kaiji. Kaiji is obsessed with gambling, and this passion comes from the author of the manga. What's interesting is Fukumoto claims not to be a gambler, yet he's worked on 7 other mangas, all on the topic of gambling. While watching the anime, you could just feel the writer's real passion for risk versus reward, and it's just absolutely contagious. In fact, Kaiji is so addicting that it can actually be a little dangerous because you might find yourself wanting just to feel that joy of gambling and the excitement that comes with it. Kaiji first appeared in the pages of Weekly Young magazine in February 1996. Kaiji was written and illustrated by Nobuyuki Fukumoto. The series was initially only meant to be a short story. However, after Fukumoto had issues getting the story down to the required size, he decided to make it a serialized manga. This decision turned out to be a really good one, as Kaiji would go on to become very successful. It has since spawned several sequels and spin-offs, as well as being turned into an anime and a live-action movie. In fact, as of 2019, there are 21.5 million volumes of Kaiji in circulation. So, the story follows Kaiji Ito, a man who struggles to find steady work even after moving to Tokyo. Kaiji is very aware of his poverty, and it really upsets him, even more so the fact that people around him are wealthy and have expensive cars and things that he can only dream of having. This ends up making the character Kaiji a relatable character for anyone that's struggled financially, or just people that are sick of seeing rich people around them just have anything they want. We see Kaiji lash out by damaging expensive cars. This shows his frustration with the current state that he's in, and just his anger towards the people who created this system. Because he's poor and dreams of being rich, he could only hate what he can't have. However, Kaiji's depressing existence becomes even worse when a loan shark named Yuji Endo shows up at Kaiji's home. Endo says he's there to collect money as Kaiji co-signed a loan for a coworker As the coworker defaulted, Kaiji now has to cover an enormous amount of money, and this is where Kaiji and Squid Game become similar. Endo offers Kaiji a choice: either spend 10 years paying off the money he owes, or take part in a black market underground gambling contest. Sounds familiar. Not seeing a better option, Kaiji picks the latter option, and quickly discovers that while the ship's rock paper scissors tournament might seem innocent, those who end up losing suffer a horrible fate. Kaiji soon learns that this isn't the only high-stakes gambling ring in the world, throwing him into a roller coaster of risk and pain as he tries to clear himself of the money he owes, while also winning the strange games that he's forced to participate in. In 2007, the series was turned into an anime called Kaiji Ultimate Survivor, and it proved to be really popular with both manga fans and new viewers, earning it critical praise. A sequel covering the new story arc titled Kaiji Against All Rules was released in 2011. Madhouse once again returned to animate the show along with most of the first season's cast. The show was released in America, although it had a slightly complicated release history. It was initially streamed on the now gone Juice platform before being picked up by Crunchyroll. However, in 2020, Sentai Filmworks announced that they had acquired the license to both seasons of the anime, and in 2021 they released both seasons on Blu-ray, making it easier for more people to watch. I actually picked up the Blu-ray box set for this review, and I will say the picture looks pretty great. So while Squid Game was addictive, Kaiji to me is the most addicting show I've ever seen. There was plenty of moments where my mouth was just on the floor because I couldn't believe what just happened. In Kaiji, don't think for a second that just because there's a main character that they can't lose. And actually, some pretty unbelievably awful and gruesome things happen. More than once. This creates for some of the truest moments of pure dread that I've ever felt watching anything. Even though it's an anime, you still can't help but feel like you're watching something with real stakes and real people involved. This makes for one of the most fascinating takes on the death game format. It just depicts so well how the human psyche can warp and twist under great pressure. Each of these games also teach lessons. One involves crossing a narrow bridge and making it to the other side first. You have the option to either lose, or will you push the person in front of you down just to get ahead. Squid Game did explore something similar, especially the one guy that just gets through every game just acting selfishly and screwing over his friends. But what Squid Game lacks showing is that you're still able to get ahead in life, even by putting others before yourself. Kaiji, on the other hand, gave us a character that's able to succeed without being greedy. But Squid Game doesn't really give us that. Instead, its main message is just very nihilistic and bleak. It's basically just that the rich are evil and you can't really do anything to stop that. Kaiji has an overall message about it being better to be a selfless person who helps others. It makes him more likable, but it also in a way explains why someone as smart as him always seems to have trouble becoming wealthy. This is what ultimately makes me like the main character in Kaiji more than the main character in Squid Game, who had charm, but he mostly acted selfishly throughout. And I also didn't really like how he kinda took advantage of certain people, but he did seem to change in the end, so I'll give him that. And this is where I want to go over some of the problems of Squid Game that Kaiji did better. In Squid Game, some of the games were just a matter of luck, kinda like the glass floor game. For one, it wasn't a kid's game like the others, at least that I know of, and you could really only win based on the order that you chose, which there was no way of knowing, so it was just pure luck and no strategy. Kaiji, on the other hand, is all about strategy, and they even get real creative with some of the games. They even managed to make a game of pachinko into just the biggest battle of strategy that I've ever seen anywhere. And what it did was manage to keep me on the edge of my seat for the entire season. So it's known that Kaiji is set and greatly inspired by the period known as the Lost Decade. The manga's creator, Fukumoto, is actually part of Japan's Lost Generation. This was a time from 1991 to 1992, all the way to the start of the 2000s. Through the 2010s is sometimes included and called the Lost 20 Years. The name itself comes from a big period of economic stagnation after the country's asset price bubbles burst. It led to people like Kaiji who simply could never hold a long-term job or position. The result was individuals not having the spending money the economy so badly needed, and eventually just leading into a really big GDP drop. While characters in the Kaiji universe like Tonegawa may have the characters like Kaiji think that their situation was their fault, truth be told, they never really stood a chance to begin with. To this day, the effects of the Lost Decade are still felt and feared in Japan, with a lost generation that is kept tumbling down a spiral that just crushes them as they age. And the odds have just been against them from the start. So, while Kaiji in a way is a depiction of Japan's Lost Decade, Squid Game on the other hand is a much more shallow depiction of capitalism. The Squid Games themselves represent a sort of metaphor of capitalism. It depicts a world where people are just forced to fight for survival or ultimately die. In reality though, capitalism isn't really like that. I almost want to say it's like how a child would view capitalism if they were getting their views from an extremist source. What makes this attempt fail even more is the characters themselves. The main character, for example, is a gambling addict and a deadbeat father. He owes money because he gambles. Nothing else. And one character was just a gangster. I feel like they each could have just worked normal jobs and not have been in this situation. Unlike Kaiji, who has no choice. He's in this situation because there's no other option. The system itself is broken, and it does a much better way of showing that. Another complaint, and probably my biggest complaint in Squid Game, was its kinda cartoonish depiction of characters that just the show doesn't want you to like.
The acting of the VIPs, all of us, was exactly what we were instructed to do by the director, by the script, in order to fulfill his vision, not mine.
No! No, don't do it, you asshole!
And indeed, Netflix approved it to the point that not a single word of my part was edited out.
Just tell us about the next game. How long you gonna string us along like this?
He's in a bad mood because of 69. Better tell him quickly.
It's enough to have a stereotype, but when it's done in a comical cartoon representation, then I no longer feel like I'm involved in the story, and now I'm basically just being preached to.
Looks like a bridge of some sort.
And it wasn't just me, I heard numerous people complain about the acting of the VIP characters. They were supposed to be these evil, bad, rich people, and it's basically a child's mind of what that would be like.
If you're Tom Cruise and you're of a mind, you can just tell the director, well, I don't like this script, and throw it out. But if you're any other actor, pretty much you can't do that.
What convinced you to bet so much on number 69?
Oh, it's such a beautiful number!
69!
I did say to the director, may I go over the script? I'm a writer and I'm happy to fix it up, no extra charge, and just punch it up a little bit, not fix because it wasn't broken, just punch it up. And they said there's no time for that, but thank you. Okay.
Who are you bidding on this time?
96.
What's your reason?
Well, if I can't do 69...
1996.
Also, one other thing that I really couldn't ignore was the only Christian character or a representation of that in the show. They have this character in particular, and basically they just act like an insane person. Like, I've never seen a real person act this way anywhere, and they portray it in such an obvious and cartoony way where I just felt like it was once again a kid's representation of this type of person that the show doesn't want you to like. If a show wants to state something, then it should be done more realistically and more subtle, but here it just looks like they were screaming, "Hey look, this is a bad person, I want you to hate this person."
You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say that's the bad guy.
If this is supposed to change anyone's opinion about certain people, then it failed and was embarrassing.
Piece of shit!
First 69 and now 96.
Kaiji, on the other hand, has no such agendas or people acting like cartoons, which is kind of funny because it is one. But instead it has the antagonists behave in these thought-provoking ways, and they'll even say things that really make you think. You don't see them as just a show saying they are the bad guy, you instead believe them. And Kaiji is just full of memorable quotes from the bad guys that you never really forget.
つまらない毎日を送り、日々を無駄に塗りつぶし、いくつになろうと言い続けるのだ。自分の人生の本番はまだ先なんだと。本当の俺を使ってないから、今はこの程度なのだと。そう言い続け、言い続け、老いて、死ぬ。その間際、ようやく気づく。今まで生きてきた全てが丸ごと本物だったことを。
The only real problem that people have with Kaiji is its art style, and you'll even find the biggest fans agreeing with this. You'll not find any fan bragging about its visual style. But the show isn't really concerned with looking good, instead it looks how it needs to look. And it really just looks harsh. But the look mirrors the world in which it takes place, where the wealthy rule and the poor suffer. But because it isn't concerned with having its characters look attractive, it's then able to focus more on their expressions, allowing us to feel what the characters are feeling. In the end, I'll say that both shows depict that desperate people are easily exploited by those with money and power. Kaiji's status as a broke loser struggling to get by makes him both a relatable protagonist and the perfect vehicle with which to explore this interesting world. So if you're looking for something to fill that void left by Squid Game, then Kaiji is the perfect anime for you. And if you didn't like Squid Game, then watch Kaiji instead because I think it's even better.
実にいい話を持ってきたんだぞ。一晩でお前の借金がチャラになる。
Anyway, thanks for watching and don't forget to become a patron to help this channel grow. Thank you.